demo of our suite, which is aimed at helping you manage your Salesforce permissions. I'm always conscious at user groups that there's a range of skills. Some of you could be very new to the ecosystem. Some of you could be there for a long time. So I've tried to put a balanced slide deck together to kind of have a bit of everything for everybody. But as we go through it,
James, if I can just stop you for a second. It's a little breaking when I'm using my access point here in the basement. It seems connection is not great. Can you use your network, Fred, instead of me, and just project here?
Yeah, sure.
Just a moment. We will try different.
This is where I wish we were in the room because we could go and get a bite to eat now. But hiya.
I need to mute myself.
Hello.
Yes, it's going fine now. Go ahead.
Brilliant. All okay?
We can hear you, James. It's good.
Awesome. Yeah, so I was just saying, conscious that we've got at user groups, there's a whole mix. There could be developers in the room, architects, admins, a range of time in the ecosystem. So I'll try to do a balanced presentation that should have something in it for everyone. I'm really keen to show you some of our products at the end. So in essence, before we start, this is my email address. Feel free to drop me an email or connect on LinkedIn if you want to talk one-on-one or need some advice with Salesforce permissions. And I'll share this again at the end. But as I'm sure you're all aware, Salesforce has a very flexible permissions model, and they're constantly adding new features. So at the start, you could only, this is going back, I think, up until about 6 years ago, you could only ever open up permissions with Salesforce. You can never restrict it. And then they brought in restriction rules, which is great. It gives you the flexibility, but it also makes it twice as hard to manage permissions within Salesforce. And they bring out great new features all the time, like permission set groups. But it can become quite hard and time consuming to manage because you've got all these different ways of managing how people can access different data within Salesforce. So whilst it's great to have the flexibility, it can become time consuming to manage. And permissions need to constantly evolve. So I think I heard one attendee mention that they've got a couple 100,000 users of their Salesforce instance. So you can imagine within that, you might have finance, HR, sales, legal, all different types of users needing different access to data, might be split by region. And even if you go live with Salesforce with a clean permissions model day one, day two, other business stakeholders realize how easy Salesforce is to configure. And so you start to need layering on different types of users, and the permissions need to evolve to support that. And whilst not the sexiest topic for a Friday afternoon, it's an important one because if permissions are wrong within Salesforce, it can give a project a really bad name. So my classic example here is if a sales director has the wrong pipeline numbers because of the wrong underlying permissions, you could be doing all the greatest sales functionality for them, but if the director's numbers are wrong because of the permissions, it can really undermine the value that Salesforce is delivering. And then the elephant in the room, risk of data legislation fines and data breaches. So really, we designed our apps to reduce the time spent managing Salesforce permissions, allowing you to get back to adding value to stakeholders and delivering important business objectives. So how would a complex permission make admins feel? I know myself, it can feel like you're looking like at a big plate of spaghetti with sharing rules going off over here, field level security over here, maybe territory management's in play. So it can end up looking like a big plate of spaghetti. Trying to document Salesforce permissions can be an incredibly slow process. You can be worried about how compliant you are. We do a lot of work with listed companies that need to be SOX compliant, and trying to meet those internal requirements can take a lot of time. Can keep admins up at night, worried about who can access what within Salesforce. I don't know if those any of these examples kind of ring true to you guys. And trying to query why one user can access a record when another user can't can be a really time-consuming process. And if you get permissions wrong, you can get bombarded by support tickets. So some common pitfalls with permissions. So a lot of the time, admins don't have the time to work on tech debt, and that's purely because the business stakeholders are calling for new functionality, and sometimes your permissions or any other type of tech debt cannot get addressed because rightly you're busy trying to add value to the stakeholders. And permissions aren't really an issue until they are. So you might know you've got a whole load of tech debt over here, but what's more important to you politically right now? Is it to keep the stakeholders happy, or is it have a clean permissions model? The challenge there is that they're not a problem until one day they suddenly are, and then it's all hands on deck to resolve the issues with permissions. And if you ignore the problem, just like with any tech debt, it just gets worse over time. I think a lot of admins can feel like cleaning up permissions can be an insurmountable project, especially if you're new to the ecosystem. We mentioned maybe 20 different ways of sharing, and trying to actually go in and understand how your permissions model is working. A lot of the time we see companies that have had multiple consultants, multiple admins come in, and they've got a tech debt of permissions built up over time. All these permissions were designed for a reason, but then the people that created the permissions have left the business, and the new admin that's come in is they're thinking, well, I don't know what this stuff is meant to do. And there can be a lack of communication testing with permissions, and sometimes there's no release management process that considers permissions, and a lack of documentation. So before starting any permissions cleanup, some of our best practices are to break the project down. We're working with a company at the moment that's got 600 permission sets. They've only got about 20 profiles, I think. But if you can break down the different steps in the project, so rather than going after sharing settings, permission sets, profiles, roles, if you break it down and look at each one individually, it just makes that insurmountable project look more manageable. It's always good to baseline your permissions at the start of any project, because then you can provide a value to stakeholders, and you can say, well, at the start of the project we had 600 permissions, now we've only got, let's say, 50. So it's always good to state how bad it is at the start before you start the project, and then you can show that the value and where you've spent the time tidying them up. Involve the business stakeholders where possible. It's always good to transfer the decision around permissions to the business stakeholder. Actually make them define the new permissions model. You can advise them, but if you transfer ownership to them of the actual permissions, that kind of protects you in the future. And try and always get email sign off before you make a change. if you're worried about SOX or internal audit requirements, just try and engage with those stakeholders as much as possible, because they're keen to actually make sure your permissions model in Salesforce is clean. So use their skills and try and get their knowledge. Open or closed permissions model. Look, we go into companies where that, I think some admins think the utopia is to have a totally open permissions model that everyone can access all data. And then you've got other companies that want to lock down permissions to the nth degree. There's normally good reasons for it. It could be if they're trying to lock permissions down because there's financial data they need to protect, or personal data. If they want to open, it might be because they've got a small sales team and there's not really much point in locking down permissions, because there might be 5 salespeople in the team and they will talk to each other anyway. So there's not really a right open or closed model. You just got to get the balance for the business and find out what the business needs. So best practice tips during a permissions review. So we always recommend remove any unused permissions before you start. That means that, let's say you've got 600 permissions, of which you think 400 are unused. We'll remove that 400 first, and it means you've only got to actually audit the 200 that are left. So get rid of all the kind of dead wood first, and it means you can actually see the wood for the trees. My slides are a bit out of kilter, apologies. I mentioned documentation. The first thing we learn when we're creating a new field within Salesforce is put in a description and help text, and then no one ever does it, myself included sometimes. But it's equally as important with profiles and permission sets. If you create one, take that time, just a couple of minutes, to just write down what the permission set does. And it means that the admin that follows you, or if you're wanting to document out the system, will know what the permissions do. Test and communicate before and after. Log in as the users. We've got the login button, login as a user button. Switch that on and make sure that you have tested it, because I've done it myself. I thought, well, I know what this change is doing, haven't tested it, and then you announce it, say this is working now. But if you log in as the users, you can make sure that it really is working. This is an interesting one. So a number of projects I've been on where the role hierarchy, that the users have been very precious about the role that they've been assigned. So if you can avoid making it emotional, take the emotion out of it. So don't have marketing director, have marketing advanced user or something. Just take any kind of confusion with job roles out of it, and that takes a lot of the emotion out of how users feel about which permissions they've got. So in terms of next steps and resources, as I mentioned, drop me an email or connect on LinkedIn. I've only got 45 minutes, so I'm whizzing through stuff to kind of give you a flavour, but happy to talk more after the presentation. Loads of stuff on our website, like applicationperfection.com. We try and put any changes to permissions up on there with each release of Salesforce. We've also got a white paper that goes into a lot more detail about our best practices for managing Salesforce security and permissions. And we'll be circulating the slide deck after the call. And I haven't got any swag. We go to the London user group, but we are going to Dreamforce. And we've got a desk at the Salesforce Ben breakout area. So if you do want some Security and Access Manager swag, drop me a line and we can get you into that Salesforce Ben hub, and you can meet us at Dreamforce. So before I get into the smarter solutions, has anyone got any questions about the slides so far? Or feel free to paste it in the chat. Okay.
No, I don't think there are any questions here, but we'll ask people to put things in the chat if they do have any questions.
Awesome. Okay, so if let me put the slide up again. So as you mentioned, smarter solutions for managing permissions. So this is our suite of apps. So we first started developing the app in 2017, and it's been constantly developed since then. The bulk of our enhancements now come from talking to our customers, and we actually have an in-app button where customers can actually request new features. So initially, when we created Security and Access Manager, it was purely focused on permissions, so allowing you to mass document permissions and mass update them. We then recently brought out Ultimate User Manager. So the Permissions Manager side is really looking at your profiles, your permission sets, rules, sharing settings, FLS, system permissions, all that good stuff. The Ultimate User Manager is looking at a user and the risk associated to it. So are they an API user? Have they got modifiable data? And really assessing the risk level associated to users and putting the user at the heart of the analysis. Instant Permissions Cloner, this really has two use cases. So it allows you to convert profiles to permission sets at the touch of a button. It takes a couple of seconds. So in essence, you select a profile, hit clone, and it clones it to permission set. And the reason why we've created that is to allow you customers to easily move from a profile-based model to a permission set-based model, which I'm sure you've heard Salesforce are pushing for. And we've been building this model out a lot recently, and we've now got the ability to clone users. So rather than having to go and assign all the permission sets, we could say, Susan's joined the company, we want her to have exactly the same permissions as Fred. You can select Fred, put in the username for Susan, it clones all those permissions onto Susan. So it really drops the amount of time you have to spend doing user setup down. Audit Planner Pro, so this allows you to really type up the permissions process that you want to audit within Salesforce and create a customizable process to your business. Really, it's for more audit-heavy companies that might have SOX or data legislation reporting requirements. Report Manager Pro, this allows you to mass archive reports. That the use case for this is really, as you know, when you go live with Salesforce, you might go live with a really clean suite of reports. Then day two, users start creating reports. Over time, pick list values change, and that report quality degrades. And over time, you can end up with thousands of reports, and then the users don't know quite which reports to look at to find the report that they need. So Report Manager allows you to just say, show any reports having been run in 6 months, press a button, and it archives them, take them out of the user UI, and then you can also mass delete. Data Dictionary Builder, I mentioned the use case of adding in your descriptions for your fields and your objects. This allows you to mass update descriptions and help text, and then expose the data dictionary to the users. So let's say a salesperson can only access 40 fields on the account, and using the data dictionary user tab, it shows them the description and help text for those 40 fields they can access. So again, another whirlwind slide. But if we dive now into the actual app, and as I mentioned, I'm whizzing through this, so just paste any questions into the chat, and I'm more than happy to follow up. So this is the home page of Security and Access Manager. So the idea of this screen is to kind of show you where your quick wins are. So what are the immediate things I can do to tidy up my permissions? This is saying, well, we've got 15 out of our 38 profiles are unused. We've got 120 permission sets in this org that aren't used. So you can very quickly see some quick wins. And the idea is you tackle these quick wins first. We've got an overview tab. I think I've already got that open. Yeah, so got overview tab, and this really guides you through each of our tabs, their main use case. And then within the app, there's also help and training. So these are like 5-minute videos on the use cases and how to use each tab. But if I dive into object access, the purpose of this first tab is to allow you to very quickly document your Salesforce profiles and permission sets and what they grant in terms of object CRUD. So there I'll grab some profiles and permission sets on the left. You can also save templates. If I hit go, we're looking at the account object. And then if I scroll down, we can see that the access on the account object. So there's not much here. A couple of profiles can read. One can view all. Might grab some sales ones. They might have some more on them. But very, very quickly here we can see what's going on. And we also edit within the UI. So rather than having to go into every profile, or Salesforce recently brought out a way to edit them en masse, but it's still pretty clunky. And we can do changes in the UI. And then we can also export this to Excel. So if I grab a few objects, I'll grab some of the standard ones. Opportunity as well. And then we can export this to Excel. And it gives us a nicely formatted spreadsheet. And the idea is that this is in a format that you could just directly hand over to audit or anyone that's interested in your permissions model. So here we've got, just as we had on the screen, profiles and permission sets down the left, CRUD rights on the top. Green means they have the permission, red means they haven't. So this is saying that Sales Manager can recreate and edit, whereas the Sales Ops Manager can also delete, view all, and modify all. Bit of audit trail down the bottom, saying the date of the export, and then we can see the different objects and how the access changes across the different objects. We've got the ability to roll back. So if you're making changes in the UI, you can also roll back to a different log. I was like myself, I thought making a small change to permissions, and then you check support tickets and you realize you've affected something else. So this allows you to very quickly roll back your changes. And we can also look at permission set groups. Objects and fields is pretty similar, so I won't spend too much time on this. But here we're looking at whether you can read or update specific fields. So again, I'll grab some profiles and permission sets on the left. So grab some sales once again. Echo. And here we can see the FLS. So we've got the CRUD rights summarized at the top. So there's the CRUD rights there, and then whether they've got read or edit on the fields. And we can, just like with the object access, export this to Excel. And we can save templates again. One cool feature in this, just whilst that's loading. So this is the FLS. So we've got read or edit, permission set, profile name, field name, and API in brackets. But if you're working with API users, sometimes the API can trip out because the FLS and trying to work out which field can be a bit of a pain. So using this tab, we could, let's pretend this is an API permission set. We could just tick them all as edit, hit save, and that opens up access to all the fields. As it's an API user, you can probably leave it open on that permission set that's assigned to the API user, or if you need to, you can lock it back down afterwards after the interface has come up and running. System permissions are very similar, but here we're looking at system permissions. So all the good stuff like, can they view setup and configuration, are they API enabled, etc. How am I doing on time? I think I've got another 8 minutes. Is that right? If I press on, the cloner tab I mentioned. So here we can literally grab a.
You have 20 minutes more if you like.
Perfect. So I'm kind of whizzing through it, as I mentioned, just to kind of give you a flavour of what the apps do. So here, if I wanted to convert a profile to a permission set, I could say the license is a Salesforce license, or it might be a community one. And then I can select the profile over here. Let's say we wanted to convert this finance one, give the permission set a new name, finance Ottawa, and then we can clone the profile. This will probably just take a second. So that we can see the profile's been cloned to the permission set. So the idea is, if you are wanting to migrate from a profile to a permission set based model, you should be able to just clone the profile into the permission set, make sure that's assigned to the users that had the profile, and then you should be able to delete out the profile. So we click see the permission, it takes us to setup, and you can see the newly created permission set, Finance Ottawa. We've also got the ability now to clone users within the app. There's lots of other features here. I'm just trying to give you a flavour. So we go to the user cloner. We could say, so I'm going to convert, let's say, Carol to a new user that's joined. These are the mandatory fields that you have on a user when you create them, as you would do normally through setup. But so in essence, you put the brief details in, then put in clone user, and it copies everything that's on Carol onto the new user. We're working with a client at the moment that has users created from Workday directly into the CRM. So we're now working on the ability to clone an existing user to another existing user, and that's coming out soon. I'll quickly show you Report Manager. So Report Manager, as I mentioned, is designed to allow you to mass archive and mass delete your reports. So on the home page, we've got some stats that are saying reports not run the last 3 months. So in this org, there's over 1,200 reports. That's actually quite small. Some of our customers have got hundreds of thousands where their orgs, over 10 years old. But this is designed to give you some intel on your reports. And then if we go to the actual Report Manager Pro tab, and I would select all folders, say show me all folders, all reports and all folders that haven't been run in let's say 6 months. So this is saying we've got over 1,200 reports that haven't been run in 6 months, and then we could say select all these reports, and then by default it archives them in this report folder that we have within the package. So all of our apps are security reviewed by Salesforce, and they're installed in customer orgs by in a managed package. So they sit in your org protected by Salesforce Shield, and we don't have any access to your data. It's all hosted via Salesforce. But in essence, we could hit archive select reports. That will archive all 1,200 to this Pro Archive Reports folder. What you might want to do is keep a folder structure. So you might want to create like a marketing archive and a sales archive, a services archive, etc. And you can really move reports in here between any folder. So this reads the reports that are in your org. And so you might want to say, actually, I just want to look at within, let's say, these marketing folders, and I just want to move those into a marketing archive. But by default, it goes into this report folder. We recommend archiving the reports for a few months, because there's always a user that logs in once every 6 months to press a button and run a report. So if you keep the archive for 6 months, you can always unarchive the reports back to their source folder. So if I were to view our archive reports, so I've recently moved home and I've started using a desktop, and it's a little bit slow with the mouse moving across the screen, so hopefully it's not stalling too much. But these are all of the archive reports. So here you can see we've tracked that this folder, this report moved from the previous report folder, marketing sprints, to the current report folder, which are Pro Archive 1. So let's say you did want to unarchive it, you could tick on unarchive and it would move it back to the source folder. There's loads more intel in here. So which reports are subscribed to, which ones are scheduled, how many reports we've got on each report type. I've worked with a lot of companies that hit the limit of how many custom reports type you have. This shows you how many reports are on each report type. So there's a ton of functionality here. If I go back to Security and Access Manager, and let's look at some other stuff. So our Intel tab. So sometimes we work with companies that say we love the product, but we don't have the bandwidth internally to do a permissions review. And then we can engage in professional services and help them define their new permissions model. But whenever we do that, anything we have to do manually, we then build into the app so that all of our customers can benefit from it next time. So in essence, anything we do manually, we create one of these Intel tab reports, and that means that you should be able to do 95% of the permissions review using the app. So, for example, profiles with or without users assigned. If I click View Data, you can see apologies, a lot of standard profiles that aren't being used by inactive users or active users. We can't do anything about them because they come with Salesforce. We can't delete them. But if we scroll down to these custom profiles, you can see we've got, if we look at this one, AP partner community user, is not used by an active user, it's not used by an inactive user. So our recommendation is, delete that profile, and then the net amount you have to audit comes down to something more manageable. So here it's got the user count beside it. So there's all kinds of good stuff in here. So we've got things like which fields are in which page layouts. It's one of my favorites. So if I look at the case object, there's a few record types in here. We can see that if we look at the Apex exception, that's in this first page layout, but it's not in any of the others. The currency field is in these two page layouts, but not in the others. And there's all kinds of good stuff in here. So which user and which roles and which territories, what are the validation rules across the org, what are the list views filtered by. So these are our kind of standard out of the box reports, but a lot of the work we've done this year is actually migrating this from Aura to Lightning Web Component. So now we have all of these reports actually in Lightning Web Component as well. And that means you can customize the reports. So you can select which fields you want in there. And obviously, as this is in your org, it reads all of the custom fields that you might have on your users. But here we can actually build custom reports on users, save the templates, and then that's one of the nice things about our apps is the templates, because then you can save them. If you have a monthly repeatable SOX or compliance process, you can save the template and then they're there for next time as well. So that's the Lightning Intel tab. The bulk exporter, there's a need. When I showed you kind of object access, there's a limit to how much data we can show on the page, because two reasons for that: we start hitting the Salesforce limits, and also there's only so much you can really process on a page before you have to scroll off the page and too far down the bottom. There's only so much data you can really see on the screen. So the bulk exporter allows you to in essence do data dumps of bulk data. I'm trying to think what else to show you. So the data description editor. I'll show you data description editor and record access next. So if I show you record access, the use case for this is really as an admin, you might have a support ticket come in that says, Fred can access this record, but Lisa can't, and they're in the same role. And then depending on how complex your Salesforce permissions are, you can spend hours trying to look through the sharing settings to work out what the difference is. So using the record access tab, I'm just going to grab a example opportunity. So there I'm just looking at a random opportunity, and if I grab this record ID, it works across all objects. I can then paste in here the record ID and hit go, and this tells me all the reasons why the user can access the record. So this is saying, so I'm looking at myself, but I'm a system administrator, which means I've got modifiable data, modifiable records, dual records on my user profile, so I can access it that way. There's a bit of territory management in play, and some public groups and showing settings. So that tells me why I can access the record. But if I then compare it to another user, say for example, Vishal, hit go, this will show me all the reasons why Vishal can access the record. And so it just takes all that effort away of scrolling through the setup and trying to understand the differences between the permissions, because you can see the differences on the page. So immediately we can see that I've got modified data, modified records, and viewer records. Vishal hasn't, but he has got some public sharing settings on, and he's also got author apex, so you can see it because he's got viewer records on that permission set. So very quickly you can see the differences between the users and their permissions, and that allows you to really hone in on where the issue is. Talking about users, I mentioned earlier the user module. So every company has a different way of looking at their permissions. Previously, we were very focused on what profiles, what permission sets give users access. This tab, the real aim is giving a deep analysis of why users can access a record and what users those permissions have. So it's slightly different. But if I look at, let's say, Jimmy, he's a quite advanced user within the system. So here we can see we've selected Jimmy, it's given him an access risk score of 100%. And that's because he's got all of these risky permissions. Makes sense because Jimmy's a system administrator. We'll do. So if I select Jimmy, I hit analyze and execute. Here it's showing the permission sets assigned to Jimmy and what's in those permission sets. And it's given him a high risk level because he's got obviously modified data, viewer data, etc. in here. But it goes through and shows you where the issues are with his permissions. And then we can select the risky ones and then remove them. We can select all or just a few of them. And then it has a very detailed analysis of what the record types he's assigned to, what's his FLS like across the different objects. So it really gives you a very good detailed overview from a user perspective. I've read through it, so should we open up to questions?
Yes, we do have a question. Just a minute.
Hi, I would like to know how. Hi, am I audible? The call.
Yep.
Yeah, I would like to know how the permission sets are managed in the user level. So, like, if they are using some permissions, or if it's not been used. Like, is there any way to track that?
Can you give more?
So we can show
What they find it using?
Okay.
what permissions are assigned to that.
So there are times when users are being assigned with some permission sets, and like sometimes they don't need to use that. And is there any way that one can identify like these permissions are not used by the users, and these are being unused in specific to the user across the org?
I'm trying to think. The best way is to document what the permissions do first of all, and then see if it's relevant.
Have you considered using both permission sets?
No, I think
Yeah.
just to help here, if I understand well, and you correct me, you're asking how you know that permission set is used by user.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell. It's almost impossible. Only way to do it if you give permission set to say this user, this permission is for this custom object, and this user never opened this custom object, then you know that he doesn't use it. But I think this tool doesn't do any tracking of those kind of things. James, correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that's right. Yeah, I mean, immediately you're giving me food for thought. But I don't think so right now. No.
Yeah,
It's, in my opinion, mission impossible unless you have very good tracking on every page that they are opening down the road, and you relate these pages to permissions somehow.
Yeah.
and thanks for introducing this tool to us. It's really
I totally get the use case though, and immediately you're making, like I said, get my mind whirring as to how we could potentially do it. But yeah, at the moment it's not helping the app.
You see, this group is famous for making you scratching your heads, when you present. But James, I have a question for you.
Go for it.
Anybody else before me? No. I see great opportunity in this tool, and very good market value for enterprise companies that has tight RSM process, what means system user management is very tight with logs, with reviews, regular reviews, with trying them to catch anomalies on all of those things with very well-defined policies. And I think we can, if somebody use your tools, it can outsource all this review, not to admin, but to this policy person who is checking this policy. Instead of coming to admin and tell him, run me logs for this, run me logs for this, I want to be sure everything is fitting policies and things like that. We just give them your tool, and they learn how to use it. They can do whatever. If they see anomalies, they raise red flag and blah, blah. Yeah. Is this correct understanding what you are covering here, or something?
100%. I mean, it depends on the company, but a lot of the time, it's best for admins to try and pass that responsibility back to the docs or compliance people that actually request reports. Where our app really helps is it's things like because work out which reports with our app, give them a read license and say, look, we've got there, so now you can log in and run this report as much as you want, and then it goes totally off the admin's desk. I think the challenge I see a lot of the time is that internal audit kind of know what they want, but they don't understand how Salesforce works. So there's always a bit of effort from a Salesforce admin's perspective to to kind of upskill the auditors as to how Salesforce works and make sure you are compliant. But your use case is totally right. Using the app, you can create templates and then ultimately pass it over to internal audit.
Okay, sounds good. I think we are on the time. Anybody has questions? There is one more. There you go.
Hey, hi, Srushna here. So I want to know if this is a free package or a managed package that we want to install on top of Salesforce. And if it's a managed package, like, is there a trial version we can try?
Yeah, we have it's a paid for app. It's a package, so you can install App Exchange or Exchange. It's right. We want to get to know our customers because I think we bring a lot of value to the table. And so if you're interested in free trial, like I said, just drop me an email.
I cannot hear.
Yeah, it is on App Exchange. You
Okay.
can get the trial version
Okay.
for free, and then
Okay.
but
yeah.
it's not open one that you can take it and build on
Got
your
it.
own.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm going to drop guys now because I've got a 3-hour drive. But Jimmy is on the line. He's from my team, so they are. Like I said,